Hello, Salesforce. Ohana Walters 954 here, and I've got another mock interview for you. This time it is an admin interview with Christian Flanagan, who is a member of the Salesforce Mentor crew. And he very graciously offered to do a junior to mid level ish admin interview. Our hope is to give you an idea of some of the questions and answers for these interviews and kind of understand the flow of what you should be thinking about when you're going through an interview. So, if you're interested in doing an interview like this, definitely check out the links below and wait till the end. You'll see my kind of quick breakdown of how I think Christian did and what I think he can improve on. Hey Christian, thanks so much for joining me for this this admin interview. I've done I've been on a series of interviews so far, and you are the next in line. So sorry, the junior admin role at XYZ company. I really appreciate you, putting in your application. I've seen some really cool stuff. So thanks so much for taking the time out to interview with us. I kind of want to start out with I guess the obligatory questions, right? Tell me about yourself. Give me like 1 to 2 minutes who you are.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for having me as well. So a little bit about me. I'm a fairly new Salesforce certified admin. I received my certification in end of July of 2022. I've had the opportunity to work for a consultancy part-time, work on a few full life cycle projects. I was part of the Talent Stacker career development program as well. So I've had a fair chance to gain some experience and work with some great companies. And currently I'm working towards my platform app builder certification. I should have that this week. And then the next step for me would be to earn my platform developer one certification. So that's kind of like who I've been, kind of some of my goals, and excited to potentially work at XYZ company.
Cool. Yeah, I think at least from what we're looking for and your background, you definitely meet some of those requirements of what we're looking for. But I do, we want to make sure as we start to go through this interviewing process. So, give me some high level Salesforce administrative best practices that you can think of. So they can kind of be on anything, right? But just as you have been learning throughout, Talent Stacker and doing some of the consulting jobs, what are some of the things that you've kind of learned and seen to be, I'll say, best practices or things you've come across of?
So biggest thing for me that I've had to get really accustomed to is document everything. I've had some clients where you're the expert, they totally trust you 100%. They don't really want to know too much about Salesforce, and they just want to be an end user, and that's totally fine, totally great. And I've worked with some clients where they kind of want you to teach them how to become an admin, so you got to document. They want to know why you changed this, something's different. um, so that's been, I guess it's not a Salesforce best practice, but it's a great practice in general. Another best practice I would say is don't overcomplicate things.
For
If
sure.
you can accomplish something simply, keep it as simple as possible. If you can add a field instead of creating some complex screen flow that would accomplish the same thing, I would say just keep it simple. As it gets complicated, it can lead to things breaking, or users will need more training on it or things like that. um, so yeah, I would say those are two really big ones right now.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So you did mention some, and potentially you are correct in that they are more general system administrative best practices, but they are really great practices to have in terms of documentation and KISS. So keeping it stupid simple, which is extremely hard to do when you're building out these things. So let's say that you're working with one of your clients and they come to you with an error, right? Let's
Mhm.
say you've potentially seen this before, you've never seen it before. What are kind of your troubleshooting steps when you get those errors?
Sure. So to start off, I'll ask them, "Hey, did you get an error code, or can you walk me through the steps on how did you reach this error?" If I don't really get a clear, concise explanation, I'll say, hey, can we hop on a quick call? Show me exactly what you did. Because that way I can either go ahead and recreate the error, or I'll be like, oh, I've seen this before. I know exactly what's going on. So that's the best way. I found the easiest way with some clients, because if you start throwing out some Salesforce jargon, they might be like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's usually the best way, is just to have them walk me through it, and then I'll be able to see, oh, it's this error code, or is, either you're triggering a validation rule, I'll explain it, or go in and tweak it.
Right. So, have you ever run into situations where maybe the error is intermittent? So, the users are experiencing it sometime, but when they go to recreate it or when you follow through with the steps, it doesn't seem to be happening when you're trying that out. What do you do in those types of situations?
Hmm. It's a great question. I would say, if they've shown me and then I either can't recreate it or something, one, I'll think of, is there any possible way the user's doing something different than they remember? Maybe it's they're using the wrong record type or something like that. Or if I can't really think of anything that's just right in front of my face, I'll go ahead and I'll just play around in a sandbox, try and do anything I can to trigger something related. And um, usually after some trial and error, I'll figure it out. I find that usually happens to me with flows.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's something hiding that will trigger it. That only happens every now and then.
Cool. Yeah, totally agree with that. And, you're kind of doing a great segue into the next topic that I wanted to talk about was sandboxes. So, can you kind of tell me about why sandboxes exist and what they're used for in the Salesforce ecosystem?
Hmm. Sure. So one of the things I've been studying for my development is, you can't just code right in a Salesforce production org. You have to first test it in a sandbox, and there's many things. Basically, Salesforce wants to test your code to be able to say, oh, hey, this is good. It's not going to break our server or anything. You can put it in production, and you can also test it there and make sure it's not going to break your production. So that's one big reason. For more of an admin standpoint, you you'll be configuring many things, you'll be creating new things, and sometimes maybe you make something and something else in the org doesn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
You create a new custom object, and you did something, and it's not working correct. So the sandbox allows you to work in an org very similar to yours, has all the metadata, but you're not going to break anything for the users in production. And for a very small organization, maybe like 5 to 10 Salesforce users, you might be fine working in production. If especially you know what you're doing, you might not break anything for them. But if you're working in a large organization, you mess something up, you're going to get a lot of emails and create a
Yeah.
lot of issues. So it just helps you test, without affecting the day to day.
For sure. Yeah, I've been in those situations a few times where you push something to production and from a sandbox and it kind of blows up in your face, right? Like the org comes to a screeching halt. So and it's just not fun. So speaking of like moving that metadata around, like we know we should work in sandboxes for various reasons of testing and building out and prototyping. How do you move that metadata from a sandbox to production?
Mhm. So the built-in functionality, Salesforce has something called change sets. You'll add in whatever you've created as a component. And let's say you create a custom object, you'll have to add the custom object, add all the fields, anything related um, to whatever you created. That's one way. What I usually use is Copado. You'll be able to log in via web browser. It seems more intuitive to me. I'm able to see things. One very cool thing about it is I can see it compares your production org to your sandbox. So I can easily see, hey, I created this in sandbox. It's brand new. It's not in production. And, maybe you'll see some things. Hey, this is, it's similar to production. Do you want to move it over? And Salesforce just came out with the developer, I might butcher it, developer console. That might not be correct term.
Mm-hmm.
So they're making it easier to um, push things into production because change sets have some limited functionality that you might have to use a custom workaround.
Right. And I think what you're looking for, I think it's called the DevOps Center. If I
Oh
may
yeah.
be butchering it as well. But yes, that is another tool that Salesforce is pushing and potentially revamping the change set. So really good on there in terms of understanding. There are different tools for migrating that metadata over and having understanding those particular pieces for it. Is there anything that you know of, maybe off the top of your head, that chain sets cannot push, or it's kind of a little bit hard to push inside of chain sets?
hmm I know exactly what you're thinking of. I'm drawing a blank, but I know you can't. I want to say reports.
Hmm.
No, it might be reports. Um, Trying to think. Yeah, I'm drawing a blank on it right now. I
Yeah.
know there's a few things, but they do come up, and that's why there's those third-party apps that allow you to kind of do a workaround.
For sure. Yeah, and mainly for me that I've seen, working throughout the years in our org at XYZ company, we do a lot of community work, and not everything can be transferred over in those communities. So you need to, well, at least from the sandbox community to production. So you need to, manually bring some of those over or use some of those third-party tools like Capado or GearSet to move those over. So awesome, really great so far. I kind of want to move into some automation conversations. So,
Mhm.
from your experience, kind of tell me um, the differences between some of the Salesforce automation tools.
Sure. So you have workflow rules that can, uh, the way I think about it is they help create tasks. So you can have it. So let's say an opportunity just closed. You want to set a follow-up call with somebody. You can set up an automation to automatically schedule a call, let's say a week from the close date. Um, you could send email alerts, a few other small things. What are the I guess, higher level or more complex automations is process builder, where you can create records, update records, have different triggers, send an actual email instead of an email alert. Usually the bulk of the automations, people tend to lean towards process builder. But Salesforce recently came out and they said, we're kind of just bundling everything into Flow for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, starting in mid 2022, I've really just been focused on using flows because it's kind of a combination of workflow and process builder, and really allows for a lot more complexity because there's some automations that get pretty complex pretty quickly. You also have a few things like lead assignment rules or case escalation rules, and those are, very simple but very powerful. Um, I've worked with lead assignment rules frequently, so I'm able to have certain leads prioritized and sent to a queue where instead of having each record go or each user, sorry, go in and try and find their leads, it's all in one place. And um, case escalation rules as well. Customer service is huge. It's, some would say, everything. And so for your high priority customers, you really want to make sure that you get to them quickly, have their questions answered. And so, you know, if it's on the weekend, somebody might be busy. So, let's say you set a rule for an hour. We want to get back to this customer in an hour. Maybe not with a solution, but we want to reach out and touch base. If that doesn't happen, Salesforce can automatically escalate it, send it to your manager, and then work on it from there.
Yeah, yeah. So I think you've definitely covered a bunch of really good automations. The one that I want to just throw out, at least for you, and I'm sure you've worked with, is validation rules as well.
Mhm.
It kind of falls into that automation category. So you mentioned that Salesforce is kind of moving towards Flow as the prominent automation tool that is going to exist at least for the future and be maintained. Can you kind of tell me about flows a little bit more, maybe the different types of flows that exist and what they're used for?
Sure. What comes to mind first is you have screen flows, and these are pretty cool because you actually interact with the flow. So let's say, I mean, you can have it triggered different ways or put in a button. Let's say at the end of let's say your opportunity moves it to a certain stage. You can have a screen flow launched, or a good one is for data entry. You could have a screen flow, pull different things from different objects, and then it's kind of like a more visual, easy way. Instead of a user seeing the entire opportunity record, you could say, hey, at this stage we need you to put in these details, or under this circumstance, you need to fill out this field. So that's a screen flow. They're pretty cool, used pretty frequently. One and then I can't think of the wording for it, but it's the general flow. You can create really complex automations. Let's say you want to, anytime, I keep using opportunity closed a lot. Let's say
That's
you
fine.
use you want an opportunity just closed. You can have a flow say, hey, let's send an email to the customer saying, giving them a list of some of the fields. You can put some of the fields in there, like, this is the total price, revenue, whatever. You can have the customer's name auto inserted. Um, you have it like a classic email template. So you can automatically send an email, or maybe you want to follow up with the customer a week from now, or maybe you want to set up a phone call. There's really, I don't know, the possibilities are endless, what you
Mm-hmm.
can do with these flows. Another flow I've worked with quite a bit is auto launch flows.
Okay.
So these flows and scheduled flows. So scheduled flows, you can, let's say you want to, I don't know, check how many accounts haven't been, I guess, updated within the last week. So you can have a auto launch flow, run, check it every night, and then maybe you have a custom rec or custom object that you want to create a record for each time, and then you can go check this record.
Yeah.
There's many ways of doing it. And then you can have just auto launch flows that run anytime a record's updated, or created or deleted, or you know things things like that. There's a lot of, anytime something's updated, you could have the flow run, and lots of possibilities, lots of automations. And the nice thing is you can really take a lot of these redundant, maybe not redundant, but just tasks that you do all the time for the sales team, and automate them, and do really cool things, and really take a lot of their time away from, I need to know how to use Salesforce, to, hey, I can just do my job.
For sure. And I think that's a really great point, at least in terms of usability of the system and making sure like people are getting to what they need to get to. And they're not like fiddling around and being limited by the system. Um, so all of that sounds really great. I think the last thing or another thing that I want to touch on in terms of automations before we move on for a little bit is just any, let's say, best practices that you know about in, or maybe let's do some maybe like high level outlining of a flow for you. So we're talking about the closed one, opportunities, and maybe it should, let's just say that it gets closed, right?
Mhm.
So what the idea that I want to do, or the requirements that I'm going to give you, is when the opportunity is closed, we want to create a renewal opportunity and sets, certain dates and pull certain fields over, and maybe even some of the, like, the products, if you have any products on it. If it's closed lost, we want to, I don't know, send emails and do a few other things. So can you maybe, like, just high level walk through some of the things that you can think of when an opportunity, like how you would create this flow when an opportunity is closed in either stage, and kind of fire those events? Like, what would you do?
Sure. That's a good one. I don't have it in front of me, so
Hey, you got to think
I
of
know.
it.
Yeah, I know. I didn't think I needed to memorize that. Sure. So I would start with an auto launch flow that would run anytime an opportunity is updated. Um, yeah, and you said close one. So I would say, um, so you used to have to the get the record every time, but now if it's running on the opportunity object, anytime one's updated, um, I wouldn't necessarily need to do that. You still could, it wouldn't really affect too much. But you'll have all the opportunity fields on there. And then I think I would use a decision element if it's, or maybe I wouldn't have to, but for this purpose, I'll say I'll use the decision element. So that'll kind of create a branch. If it's close one, go this way. If it's close lost, goes this
Yeah.
way. And then there will be a little branch that's always there that says, the flow's finished. So then um, after that, I would depend. So if you said close one, you wanted an opportunity created.
Yep.
Is that correct? And then close lost, I forgot.
Let's
Did you
just throw
say
some emails and
throw some emails?
yeah, let's just throw some emails out there.
Okay. So for close one, I would say um, I would go to create a record element, and then I would create I believe you said a renewal opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd create a renewal opportunity, and um, it would all it would have the fields from the opportunity that was updated. So I could put those fields in this new opportunity, and then maybe if it's a renewal, um, you could do an inflow formula if you want to create, let's say the renewal opportunity is 6 months from now. You could use a function like today plus 6 months from now, um,
Yeah.
something like that. And then maybe create a reminder in a calendar as well. So you could add another element after that. Hey, create a task 6 months from now, or an email event, or just a call reminder. And then after that, I believe that would be sufficient. That kind of branch of the flow would be closed. For close lost, I wouldn't need to create any new record, but I would have to create an email. I don't think not a task, but an email event.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on who you want to send it to, maybe I would add a couple email events onto that just for simplicity. Um, but maybe you send it to your manager, and then, you know, maybe you want to send it to your customer as well. Maybe, hey, sorry, we couldn't do business. We hope maybe reconsider in the future.
Right. Right.
Or
Yeah, I think you outlined it really well, and it kind of brings up one piece that starts the next segment, which is, so we're creating this renewal opportunity, right? But at least for right now, there's no way of knowing, or I guess it kind of gets into some of the solutioning. But how do we know where the renewal opportunity came from, right?
Mhm.
What things can you implement as a Salesforce admin to know, okay, this is a renewal opportunity, and it spawned from this other one. So what would you do in that kind of, if you were presented with that problem or situation?
Okay. That's a good question. I think maybe I might create a new record type. It'd be very similar to the opportunity that we're working with, but that'd be a good way to differentiate. This is a renewal opportunity. So I'd create a renewal opportunity. And with those fields, I could be able to see when it's created, things like that. And I would need to create a new page layout as well. Maybe we don't need everything that was on the original opportunity. Maybe we need a few more things. And with the renewal opportunity, the sales process might be a little different. We're
Mm-hmm.
already doing business with the customer. We might not need to do all the qualification um, and analysis and things like that. Maybe it's like a subscription. Hey, they're going to do
Mm-hmm.
business with us. Same thing next year. So off the top of my head, that's what I think I would do.
Awesome. And so I think that's really great. And the idea behind, potentially there being a shorter sales cycle for renewals can definitely happen. I've seen that in a lot of different orgs. Would you do or create any new fields for, like, let's say on the renewal opportunity to know if it had or which opportunity it came from?
Yeah. Yeah. So you could create um, a self lookup field on the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity object, and that would kind of create a hierarchy. So you could say this is the main opportunity, and all these child opportunities or opportunities that are created from this opportunity. These are all renewals, or maybe some of them were just additional opportunities that were different and needed a different record created. Um, so that's kind of the way I would lean towards going about it.
Very cool. So you mentioned, a lookup field, and there are in Salesforce multiple types of relationship fields. So why would you use a lookup field over, let's say, like a master detail relationship, or I guess technically an external ID or something like that?
Okay. Um, yeah, if external objects and IDs kind of I mean, those are usually for more advanced solutions, I feel. Um, you know what? You probably would want to use a master detail relationship. I guess it would depend on how many child records you're planning on having.
Mm-hmm.
If it's one or two, you might not need it, but you know, for an account, you want to see all the opportunities, and you might want to see how many opportunities are per account. Um, so yeah, I think for this case, a lookup might be pretty sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it would just depend on the use case and how specific the needs are.
Yeah. And then kind of segueing with fields a little bit more. So, what do you do? Let's say if your users are entering in bad data, or well, let's just say bad data. How, as a Salesforce admin, do you kind of help guide them along or maintain some good data quality inside of orgs?
Take away all the text boxes.
That's
Uh,
definitely one way.
yeah, you could. So this is a good question. I would say you get one or two text boxes for notes or, just some scratch paper. But for the most part, in a sales process, things aren't changing too much. You've got your stages, you've got how many solutions are you offering? You want those in Salesforce to keep track of them. So instead of every time you make a sale, you got to type in everything, you can create pick lists and, you know, give the user a choice of four things or however many. And then you can even go as far as restricting those pick lists and then have dependent fields. So based on a field that's, based on the stage or something, some other field, you can say these are your options. And then you can even go as far as page layouts. You can, for certain record types, they won't see certain fields, or for certain record types, you have certain pick lists. And so that's a great way. And then also validation rules, as you mentioned earlier, that's a great way of for when pick lists or checkboxes aren't going to make the cut. or if other, restrictions aren't in place, you can use validation rules to kind of give the user a message that they can see and be like, hey, under this circumstance, you can't choose this. Or at this part of the sales process, you aren't allowed to make a change to this field yet,
Yeah.
or things like that.
Yeah. So I think those are all really great tools and things that you can use for, maintaining that data quality and things like that. And you mentioned one piece specifically that I want to kind of dive in a little bit deeper on, which is being able to kind of limit the, let's say, access that a user has or an individual has. So maybe we
Mhm.
don't want them to see this field, or we don't want them to see these picklist values. So what kind of like knobs do a Salesforce admin have in terms of like access control and field access and things like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a bulk of the Salesforce admin's role right there. Um, yeah, so to start off, you have your organization-wide defaults. So that's kind of the baseline and very important as well. So you can set what people can see, what they can edit, and um, it's kind of just a general blanket. So generally, there's private, public read only, and public read write. So for the most part, what I've worked with is private or organization-wide defaults. So each user can see their records alone and whatever objects are given via their profile. And so each user is assigned a profile, and this profile gives them access to the objects they can see and also what fields they can see. And so that's a bulk of the security right there. And then you can go as far as um, expanding that even more. So maybe you're on a team, your team needs to share opportunities. So you could have a sharing rule that would say, on this team, everybody's opportunities are shared together. And you know, maybe then your manager needs to see it as well. He wants to see everybody's opportunities, see what's going on. So you can set up a role hierarchy. So you can have your sales manager and then all the sales team underneath him. So he'll be able to see everybody underneath him, their records, um, and things like that. Let's see, did I touch on everything?
I think you touched on
Um,
most, but I will leave potentially jog your memory with one section here. So
mhm,
let's say you have a profile set up and it's limited access, and um, there's maybe a few different people or like one or two people that need to get access to certain fields that are on the page layout that other people in the kind of same department don't have.
mhm.
What would you do in that situation to kind of elevate their either access or give them more um, I'll say skills or more visibility than
Mhm.
other people in kind of like the same profile?
Yeah, so depending on how much access is needed, I would create permission sets. Um, Generally, you kind of want to limit how many profiles you're creating because then if you have 15 sales profiles, you're going to get confused pretty quick. So you can create permission sets to grant additional access. And then let's say you're using these pretty frequently. It's not just a one-time basis. I would put them in a permission set group so then I can easily assign or revoke the access to those individuals. And it makes it a lot easier to um, give permission for a certain bit. And you can even say, um, I guess, restrict it to a time basis, like, hey, we'll give you this permission for a week or,
Mm-hmm.
things like that.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you nailed it there, at least for making sure that you kind of know a bunch of the different knobs. There's a wide breadth of things inside of Salesforce for sharing, and they're adding new ones all the time. So I think there's like exclusion rules or something like that that recently got added. So um, just keeping on top of those things, it can be a lot. But kind of speaking on that, what do you do to kind of stay up to date with Salesforce information, knowledge, and the new things that are going on in the ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like you said, there's a lot of it. So Salesforce puts out, um, I don't know if release notes is the right word, but
Mm-hmm.
they generally send out, hey, here's what we're planning on doing next year or in the next coming months. And that's a great way to stay on top of it. And, I follow lots of content creators that will, break it down, give you a nice short video. There's different websites, newsletters. I use Trailhead a lot. And so I can go on and see what are the new badges, what's coming. Um, and so that's a bulk of how I stay up to date.
Awesome. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of information to cover, and reading those like newsletter, or I'll say news filled textbooks of like release notes from Salesforce can be a lot, but it is good information there.
Mhm.
So we've been going on for a little bit, but I do want to flip the script for a bit and see if you have any questions about me or for XYZ company.
Sure. Um, I would just say and kind of ask what are some of the issues or problems that you're running in on a day-to-day basis and kind of what that looks like and what my day-to-day would be.
For sure. So XYZ company, as you've kind of been hearing, is decently large with about 500 users in multiple products and in multiple regions. So one of the biggest problems that we have is just being able to stay up to date with some of the latest technologies and things that come through, the changes that come through with Salesforce. So when critical changes come through, we have a process to where we have to test those things out in our multiple sandboxes and then push it out to all of the different users that we have. And since this is multi-regioned, we do have to have some different language aspects are involved there as well. So there's a lot of those different knobs that we need to control because since there are multiple regions, we want to make sure that everybody is seeing the right things that they need to see and they're not struggling or seeing things that they don't need to see. With
Hmm.
that, there are a lot of automations, as you can guess, and being able to jump into those quickly, understand the guidelines that we have built out, and then updating or expanding on with new features is definitely what we are struggling with, and why we're trying to look for somebody like yourself who can fill those gaps.
Yeah.
So your day to day will be a lot of coming in, understanding the either the backlog or understanding the backlog, but you'll have a sprint's worth of work to get done. So we do have an agile methodology. All of that stuff will be groomed, and there are grooming sessions and a few other ceremonies that go along with that. But you'll be involved with all of that type of stuff, and then you'll get those tasks, work them, run it through the QA process, and then there's like final deployments twice a month on making sure like those changes are going through. So we have a pretty, I won't say a strict process, but we do have a process for moving things from the lower level sandboxes and that development lifecycle for all the things that we do. Because, like I've mentioned, if we brick something in production, it could potentially affect hundreds of users and lots of sales, as we are a global company. So
Hmm.
other than that, you'll be working with your team to figure things out. You'll be meeting with the end users and stakeholders, gathering requirements and things like that, to where if the tickets aren't fully fleshed out, you'll be helping and figuring those out and then building the solution there. So did that answer your question on kind
Yeah,
of day to
no,
day?
that sounds great. And I think, yeah, that sounds like a fairly common day to day.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions that you have for me?
At this time, I don't think so.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna wrap this up here. We're gonna take this back to the hiring managers and some of the other people here, or sorry, HR and some of the other people here. I'll give them my feedback on how the interview went, and we will kind of go from there. So you'll be hearing back pretty soon on how it's gonna go.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you, Warren.
No problem, Christian. It's been nice interviewing you today, and I hope to talk with you soon. All right, so we have completed the interview, and I think that Christian did actually really good. He kind of, sandbagged it a little bit. He told me he wanted like a junior to mid-level interview, and I gave him a few more junior questions. But he definitely knows his stuff and could probably kind of hit that, Salesforce admin. I don't know if it's mid-level or whatever you really want to call it, but a Salesforce admin type of role and kind of skirt past the junior role. So he had really good responses. He got tripped up on a few things, like he may have called a record trigger flow an auto launch flow, but that's okay because in the way that he explained it, I knew as an experienced person what he was talking about. So that bodes really well for the interviewer. So as he watches this video over, he can kind of tweak and learn from his mistakes there. So doing things like practice interviews is really good for you to catch those mistakes now instead of being in an interview and potentially fumbling around with it. Overall, though, I would definitely send him through either to a more technical round or even to another set of interviews that could really test his skills a lot deeper. But for me, it's a pass from his end. And if you don't want to be fumbling around in your interviews, definitely check the links down below or go to courses.salesforcementor.com where you can sign up to do a practice interview with me. I will be doing breakdown videos on a lot of the questions that we talked about here. So if you're interested in those, make sure to hit that subscribe button and punch the bell so that you can get notified of any of those videos when they come out. As always, I'm Walters954. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, I believe in you.